و عملکرد مجرمانه کوبلر
25 years ago, almost to the date, as I said, the Muller's regime began to purge dissent by executing anyone who remained steadfast to their beliefs that the brutal regime was not representing the people of Iran and that regime change was necessary. Within 3 months, 30,000 political prisoners, the majority of whom were members or supporters of the People's Mujahideen Organization of Iran, had been massacred. The true face of Iran's regime remains the same today: arrest, torture, and execution of political opponents lies at the very heart of the regime's campaign to hold on to power. The men in office now, including the newly elected president, were the decision makers then in the main, and they perpetrated what many considered to be the most horrific, unpunished crime against humanity since the Second World War. I am appalled, as I say, that the Secretary-General has ignored the comprehensive report of the International Committee entitled In Search of Justice, headed by the Vice President of the European Parliament, Dr. Alejo Vidal-Quadras, representing 4,000 parliamentarians the world over. As many will know, our friend Taher produced this particular book, this disturbing book, about his findings, and the book is a clear indictment of the actions of Martin Kobler and his false reports about the situation on the ground in Iraq, including the issue surrounding Ashraf. I remember Taher telling us here in this Parliament that he was ready to go to court to defend his remarks, and he told UN lawyers who had tried to silence him, and I use his words, "Silence is not an option. Either take me to court or undertake a serious investigation." This expose makes it clear who is telling the truth. Let me tell Martin Kobler, if he feels he is right, and if he feels he's telling the truth, then he simply has to put pressure on the Iraqi government to allow visitors to Camp Liberty. Many of us have declared our readiness to go to Camp Liberty and see for ourselves. We can then make an impartial report. Why are the media not allowed to go to Camp Liberty and freely report what is happening there? Returning to the issue of human rights in Iran, we know that since Iran's election on the 14th of June, over a 24-day period, 90 individuals have been executed. In a 24-day period since the election of a new president in Iran. The Iranian regime continues to use stoning, continues to use flogging, rape, torture and public hangings to suppress the Iranian people's desire for freedom and democracy. However, in the face of such suppression, the Iranian people have remained steadfast. The new president, falsely dubbed as a moderate, should be subjected to greater scrutiny. We should remember that in the presidential debates before the election, Mr. Rouhani sold himself as a man capable of curtailing the nuclear program. Remember, this man has held many of the highest offices in the Muller's regime. He's been National Security Advisor to the President, Supreme Leader's representative on the Supreme National Security Council, a member of the regime's Supreme Defense Council, and for 2 years their nuclear negotiator. He has been a core member of the regime almost from the beginning. Rouhani is not a force for change. He's proud of his role in suppressing student demonstrations in 1999. He's been in key positions regarding the regime's terrorist activities. As Mrs. Maryam Rajavi, the president-elect of the NCRI, announced to a major international gathering in Paris only some weeks ago on June the 22nd, and I quote, "Nothing will change as long as freedom of expression and human rights remain non-existent in Iran. As long as political prisoners and political parties are repressed, as long as the regime's intransigent policy in Syria and Iraq remain intact, and as long as the regime insists on building nuclear weapons. And she is right. Nothing will change as long as this brutal regime continues to use terror and repression to advance its policies. My committee will work hard to expose Rouhani's false profile. We shall not rest until the residents of Camp Liberty are safe and secure. We will not cease until Iran is free and human rights are respected in that country. Together we will prevail.
Chairman, thank you. And it is a great privilege to be here with you again, and a great privilege to address you amongst my colleagues, all of whom have held your desires in their hearts and in their minds for a very long time. And as we've just heard from a most impassioned and absolutely incredible speech, we have got to keep fighting. We've got to keep letting the United Nations know what is going on and hold them responsible for what's happening to the brave people who are there. And the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and Under-Secretary for Political Affairs Ambassador Jeffrey Feldman should immediately stop considering Martin Kobler as a reliable source of information and instead order an independent investigation into the behaviour of Martin Kobler and Masoud Durrani. The problem here would be to find an honest investigation team within the United Nations. I never thought that I would be standing before you saying today that the United Nations needs to find an independent investigation team that we can support. Don't we hope and pray that they would always have been doing that? Of course we do. Of course we do. So we have a duty towards those residents. I would call them prisoners. We have a duty towards them to help them and to try and support them and let the world know